Did you hear what Paul was talking about this morning? How he claims every identity in the room as he sets out what it is that he's doing. How he claims his management of change, how he sets forward a change management theory that is about becoming the other person in order to win them over. It has nothing to do with becoming the person that Paul is. It's Paul becoming every other person in the room. He begins, "Though I am free, I have made myself a slave." I have questions. How do you make yourself a slave, Paul? Why would you do this? And what privilege do you have that slavery is a choice for you? How might you imagine this could feel if you are actually an enslaved person? Someone whose choice might be to live as free, to be anything but enslaved. And here's this guy saying, I'm not a slave, but I can become a slave. I have made myself a slave in order to win slaves. I think the enslaved person might have something to say about this presumed choice. I find this a particularly problematic statement here at the beginning of Black History Month, as I'm quite certain no one wanted to be in the chattel slavery system. Paul goes on, "To the Jews, I became as a Jew in order to win the Jews." Now, one of the principal tenets that many of you know about Judaism is that it's a religion that doesn't proselytize. It doesn't seek to convert. This is why you get asked, "Are you Jewish?" before someone speaks to you with a ulav or an etrog, or who wants to do a mitzvah with you, or who wants to say a prayer with you during the high holidays here in New York. "Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish?" is a refrain that we know here on the streets of Manhattan. And all you have to do is simply say, "I am not," and the conversation will end. There is lore, Talmudic tradition, that if you come to a rabbi saying, "Rabbi, Rabbi, I would like to be Jewish," the door would close on you 3 times before you are allowed to enter. That is how firm this belief that we do not proselytize. It is ingrained in Jewish thought and Jewish wisdom that God makes people who they are, that God made the Jewish people who they are, and that if you come saying, "I would like to be Jewish," we better make sure this is God's doing and not yours. So we close the door. And we wait for Spirit to speak again, and we close the door, and we wait for Spirit to speak again. And on the 3rd knock, the rabbi, with some amount of skepticism, will welcome you in and say, "We can begin a conversation." Many of you know that when I was younger, when I moved to San Francisco, I started practicing in Judaism. It was after years in London, and it was after years of worshiping in kind of Quaker meeting style, all years getting over the trauma of my fundamentalist childhood. But that time in Judaism, and then ultimately the time that I spent in a conversion class that was a year long, that met every Tuesday night, that dove into Jewish theology and Jewish tradition and Jewish rite, that was all about learning what Jews do and think, and then practicing that week in and week out. Spent a year. There's so much more than our Christian tradition of, you want to be a member? Great, meet with the pastor, go to a new member class, maybe if there's one coming, or otherwise just say that you'll pledge and we'll let you in. Judaism says no. You will learn and you will become our people. When Ruth says this to Naomi so many, many years ago, "Wherever you go, I shall go, and your people shall be my people," this is a shock to Naomi. And Ruth spends years and the rest of her life learning to be as her people. I didn't ultimately convert at the end of that year. It wasn't something that felt native to my soul. I learned what Jews think and how Jews pray. I learned enough Hebrew that I could manage. I learned how to eat and cook and welcome people around a table. And there are still many practices that I learned in that year that I still look at with a certain amount of what we call holy envy, envy of other religions' traditions. I still think of Shabbat dinner as the best thing you can do on a Friday night. I love the Jewish practice of walking to worship on Saturday mornings or any time, because it is through the community that we come to God. You don't just appear at synagogue, or you don't just appear at church, you walk through your community. You see the person that's sleeping on the sidewalk looking for a loaf of bread. You see the person walking down the street with tears in their eye. What day have they had? You see the children laughing on the playground. You see the people walking through the grocery stores. And it is by seeing each other that then you can come to see God. I think that's a beautiful way to come to church. I also love the Jewish practice of staying really local on holy days, of not taking transport or starting your car, ways of incorporating less into more. For many, many years after I moved to New York, I modified this and wouldn't take subways on Sundays. I could only go as far as I could tolerate being on a bus. And the bus is a great way to travel when looking for community. You see the world around you. I recommend taking more buses or walking wherever is possible. But when Paul says to the Jews, I became as a Jew in order to win the Jews, let's understand that this is not what any Jewish person has in mind for how to be a friend to them. This idea of winning Jews is not something that the Jewish people ever wanted or thought of or need. This winning Jews for Jesus isn't a thing, Paul. You sound like a wolf in sheep's clothing. You sound like a trickster. You sound like a seeker of converts, a spy, someone not to be trusted. You don't sound like somebody who's winning people for God. Paul's third idea is that to those under the law, I too followed the law. But then he says, even though I don't have to. Now, the law of Moses, of Leviticus, of dietary and social customs, that's what we're talking about here. That's what Paul's talking about. He's talking about social norms of a particular people, a tribe. He's talking about mitzvahs. He's talking about all the rules and regulations and orthopraxis, which is to say the right way of doing, that is at the core of Judaism. Now, this caveat is fine on its surface. To those under the law, I too followed the law. It's a caveat about leading by example, about asking someone to do as I do, not just as I say. We might say it's practicing what you preach. I like this idea at the start. But then why does he have to add this parenthetical, even though I don't have to? To those under the law, I too followed the law, even though I don't have to, is what we heard Lynn read this morning. And this, even though I don't have to, is what feels finger-waggling to me. It's doing something for appearances, not because you want to or have to. It's because you get to. And then you're telling everyone about it. Now, I could continue to argue with this, but I'm going to quote someone far wiser than me about this. Here's Jesus' words. Matthew chapter 6. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, Jesus says, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees you in secret will hear you in secret. When you are praying, do not heap up empty praises as the Gentiles do, for they think that will be heard because of their many words. Don't be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray simply. And Jesus gives us the words of the Lord's Prayer. And finally, whenever you fast, Jesus says, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. This in contradiction to those under the law. I too follow the law, even though I don't have to. Let me tell you all the reasons that I don't have to. I don't have to do this. I'm doing this to be seen, is what Paul is saying. And this has problems. The least of which is what Paul says next. He immediately then says, now to those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, so that I might win those who are outside the law. So which is it, Paul? Have you come under the law, or have you gone outside of it? Who are you trying to win? You can't have it all ways, Paul. Bread is best buttered on only one side. Now I'm starting to get confused here. I'm also starting to get angry. Angry like whenever I'm in the presence of a person with unbridled narcissism. You might know the type. The person who sucks all the energy out of the room by claiming all the identities in the room. You know the sort. The person that says, oh, I know exactly how you feel. The interrupter who says, oh yes, I've been there, and then goes on to tell you their story when you hadn't even gotten 4 words into yours. The person who lacks the empathy of, I can relate, I'd love to hear more, and instead says, I'm that too, I'm just like you. Let me tell you all about it. This person who makes you feel so small, because in their presence you aren't you. You only exist so that they may exist. The energy vampire, the person who always steals your thunder, the person who makes you feel so very, very small. Well, that's not you, and it's not about you. That's the point. It's about them. It's Paul. And Paul goes on. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. Don't insult me, Paul. Don't insult those who are sick, or the people who are in a weak moment, or the people who struggle and labor despite all odds. Don't become weak to win the weak. Maybe they don't want to be won, maybe they want to be healed. Put your own oxygen mask on first, we like to say and remind each other. The way to help a person isn't by absenting your own strength. They may need it. It's by channeling your resources and sharing our full selves with each other. To those who are struggling, yes, we may share our struggles. But to those who are struggling, a strong hand, a soft shoulder to lean on, words of comfort and strength and belief and faith and hope. To those who are weak, lend your strength and become stronger together. And finally, Paul says this, I have become all things to all people. Come on. I have become all things to all people so that I might by any means save some. By this point, it's hard for me to hold the Bible in my hand as I'm reading this. Have you completely forgotten who you are, Paul? Have you forgotten who Jesus is? This is the Jesus that you profess. But the line between who you are and who God is now one that is well in your rearview mirror. I would urge you to turn back. You have become all things to all people. I think not. I question your personhood itself. You are one human, one man, one great thinker. But do you know who you are, Paul? Do you have any sense, and here's my empathy, of the unique and wonderful creation that you are? that needs to be strong, and either outside or inside the law, and either free or enslaved, or either Jew or not Jew. But not what everybody else is, Paul, who you are. Can you tell me, in a short phrase, Paul, who you are? Because if you tell me that you are all things to all people, I know you're full of it. I also know that you've forgotten who Jesus is. The beginning, the light of the world, the one who all things are created, and through whom all things are created for good. Paul, you are creation, not creator. Now, the problem that Paul is suffering from here, I believe, is one that all of us can experience from time to time. This problem is best solved in good conversation with great friends or those you love, family, the one whose pillow you curl up on in early morning time. It's the ones that you can talk to when you feel lost, when you want to say, who am I? What am I doing here? What's my next job? How will I go on? What shall I be? And the person who loves you says, you will be who you are, and you will be what you are becoming. Or you could go to Paul, and he'll tell you that it's his way or the highway because he's been all ways. That's the idea of change management that Paul offers. I don't find it relevant. It's not Jesus's management style. It's been the church's. It's not mine. And I don't think it's yours either. Ecumenical and interfaith relations rely on plurality, not production. To understand that there are Jews and Gentiles, and to know that each may see God in their way. To know that there are captors and enslaved, and may we come to see the world through the one in pain's eyes, and learn to be free and to set each other and ourselves free. Diversity and a sense of welcoming the stranger is better than saying, I'll be the stranger. No, you won't. You'll only put on their clothes for the sake of appearances you go about. Instead, Jesus comes. God sends Jesus. God is Jesus. And we together may say to each other, I want to know the person you are. I want to know this. I want to know your strengths and your weaknesses. I want to know the laws and the customs that you follow and the ones that you don't. I want to tell you maybe what I think about that and what I follow and don't, and maybe together we'll find a new way. The way that is formed in relationships with another full person who is entirely different than yourself. I want to know the faith you profess, the freedom that gives you life, and I want to know the things to which you are enslaved, for we are all enslaved. To work or email, the things that end with aholic, unhealthy relationships, alcohol or other substances, food or exercise, it's whatever keeps you back from being fully you and fully free. I can't possibly become enslaved the way that you are. And you can't become enslaved the way that I am. Because what holds us back is ultimately as individual as what strength we were granted. But Paul is not interested in this theology of the cosmos, this theology of God who is expansiveness, God's self. Paul's only interested in telling you he's done it already, and he thinks this is winning. I don't feel like he's winning. And when I read Paul, I don't feel like I'm winning either. And I never feel this way when I read Jesus or when I hear Jesus speak. When Jesus speaks, gentle, good shepherd that he is, I feel met, not consumed. I feel seen, not absorbed. I feel loved, not told, I've done that better than you will do it. When Jesus speaks, I know who I am. I know who Jesus is. And I know together there is something we may do. Maybe you do too. I hope you do. Change is hard, as we all know. And Paul offers change management approach after change management approach. And I often don't agree with it. The church's first theologian, writing before the Gospels were written, he gets the prize of being the first one there. His words get encapsulated and bound together in our scriptural texts. He is the first, but he is not the last word on theology. And he shouldn't be. So many other theologians. Throughout the centuries, the reformers today, the people who preach liberation as the heart of the gospel. There are better ways to offer change, and maybe we might not even think about it as change if we could take a page from Jesus rather than from Paul and learn to call it growth and healing and coming to strength and coming to know the love of God that is for you and for all people. This isn't God who has become each of us in order to win us. This is God who says, each of you are a part of me, and I've already won. This is God, the mother hen, that gathers her chicks close to her bosom, that keeps us all safe, and that says, come, children, delight and play, for have you no idea of what wonders I've made you to be? That's the God I profess. It's not the Paul that holds us back. Amen.